Okay, we are recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. That's not good. I figured it out.
Don't abuse that.
Next week, David's like, Joseph is no longer part of the under.
Joseph is no longer with us. Oh man. Well, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 156 of The Underground. We are back after a long hiatus. We will be taking the rest of the year off. Right, Joseph? That's still happening? I mean, as far as like the show is concerned.
Yeah, as far as the show is concerned, we'll be taking the rest of the year off after today, and we'll be starting back fresh on January 1st. Sorry, guys. I went to a work project that was only supposed to be a week, possibly 2 weeks, and it ended up turning into a bit over a month. But we're back now, and then I'm going to be going to travel to go see family for Christmas. So
we'll be doing some other stuff. I have some stuff in mind. I haven't quite decided, some personal stuff in my life has changed recently, so I'm trying to kind of figure out the rest of the year. And other than that, I think things are good. We'll be getting back to some game streams. Depending on how tomorrow goes, I may be live streaming the God of War DLC before we get back to Max Payne. So I might do that for a couple.
Nice.
I might do that for a couple hours because they're putting out a free download tomorrow.
I saw that actually, and
Yeah.
I just want to say we appreciate everyone who's here tonight. And again, sorry for the long layoff. Like, it was not supposed to be what it turned out to be at all.
We were supposed
to.
Yeah, we were
in our plans to take we would never, just so y'all are aware, take a month off unless there was extraordinary circumstances. And that was wild. I almost was considering. I didn't tell you this, David, but I was like, should I just get on my phone and just call him through?
I know. I thought about it, but I was like, for the sake of the audio, I was like, I don't want to, It's one thing when it's like guests and maybe they don't have the best audio setup. It's another thing when you wondered where we were, Dungeon Master. Yeah, it happens. So for everyone out there that's listening, the best way to be able to keep up with what's going on a week-to-week basis with us is to get into the Discord. Shameless plug for that. Typically, we always post when we're going live, and if for some reason you have a question or you want to know something, we're in the Discord every day, so you can
it's just
catch
easier
up on
for
all
us
of that.
to do it that way.
But don't worry.
Hopefully,
so go ahead.
Hopefully, we can start I know we were too for a while doing the YouTube community posts as well, and making a post on, even if it was just to our story on Instagram or TikTok. But just with this past month was just crazy. So sorry for not notifying everyone on there. But yeah, Discord is probably going to be the best way. It's definitely always going to be on Discord. But outside of that,
all right,
next year we're looking to be more consistent, more active, higher quality content. And let's not forget, we're hoping that the value for value system next year would take off. And speaking of which, we have a producer for this episode, John Burke. Thank you for your donation. And for those who are not familiar with the value for value system, it is a system where you get to support us directly. And it's basically just a system David and I created that we, got inspiration from the No Agenda podcast that took inspiration from the Bible. And kind of just being able to allow the audience to donate via your time, talent, and treasure. Your time and your talent, meaning like any way you think you want to help us grow our brand, our podcast, our platform, whether that's through any editing, doing thumbnails. I know Whoopa Troopa, shout out, has done thumbnails for us and various artwork. Then your treasure, meaning making PayPal donations or donations in any form through the various links we have on our direct.me link and page. So yeah, it's just a way that, you can give us how much you're enjoying our podcast, our social media clips, everything that we do and put out. You can, whatever you feel like that's worth, you can donate back in that form. So if you think that's worth $5, a night out at the movies, whatever, the choice is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, and so we're gonna discuss a couple different. We got quite a bit of housekeeping to get through because we're waiting on our guest. He's in Bible study right now, so as soon as he's done with that, he should be joining us. But before that, let's get through a little bit of housekeeping. This has to do with the value for value system and kind of our intent, pretty much with YouTube moving forward. So Joseph and I have been thinking, and we've been doing a lot of talking, and we are going to start posting live streams around 24 hours after we finish the stream. It might end up being a little bit longer than that, so bear with me. I've got to kind of figure out a schedule, but we record on Monday nights. And the plan would be to have the posted version of the podcast on YouTube on Wednesdays. The live version of the show will never get monetized. We have no intention of doing that moving forward. But from now on, anything that we post and any game streams that I do, I am going to start monetizing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, putting the podcast together costs money. And the value for value system hasn't taken off for us quite like we were hoping it would at this point. So our general hope in being able to do this is to recoup enough money so that we can basically pay for the podcast. That pretty much just comes down to our podcast host and then paying for Premiere because that's where we do all of our edits. If we get to that, we're going to be golden for a while. And if we get to a place where the community has grown enough and it's being funded through the community, we'll turn all of that off because that's ultimately the goal. But as all of you know, times are kind of hard right now, and so we're having to find those ways to do that. I still have no intention of trying to sell y'all toasters or lame mobile games or, pick your poison of things that are on the internet right now.
But if you want to become a lord or lady of Scotland,
I will personally provide you. Dude, we should just start our own version of that.
Yeah. Do you want to become a lord of lady of Georgia?
We should start selling fake plots of land in North Dakota.
Yeah, right.
Do
you want to be a cowboy?
Yeah.
Buy your plot of land.
But yeah, that is that's pretty much it. I hope you guys understand. Really, if you're catching the show live or if you listen to this as a podcast, nothing is changing. It's literally just posted videos, and then when I do game streams.
Yeah, because as far as to reiterate what David said, the podcast and the live stream on YouTube is going to stay ad-free. But, something that we have always said from the very beginning is that our goal and our intent is to always, not have advertisement. We actually prefer that, but that's also dependent on being able to get that value back in return. And we do think that, I really do think our podcast is worth at least $5.
Oh, let's not put.
For a donation.
Hey, hold on. Let's not put
$50 a donation.
No, I'm saying it is not. It's not up to us what the value is. Y'all decide. Y'all decide the value. That's how that goes.
Yeah, no, I know that. The point I was trying to say is that I do feel like it is worth something, right? And just like I thought that the No Agenda podcast was worth something, but it is up to you to decide whether that's $1, $5, $50, $500, $5,000. That's kind of the route I was going with it. But if you also, times are really hard, and so if everybody wants to support us just with your time and your talent, we're very appreciative of that. And if the direction is then hey, we don't mind having advertisements, we can deal with that. That's the route we're going to go. And so that's kind of why we've chosen to go that route, because it is one thing, we have to pay for everything, number one, that we're doing. And then number two, there's nothing wrong with that. Times are really hard for everyone. That's why we're just gone for a month for work.
To be honest, guys, if you don't want to see the ads, get an ad blocker.
Yeah.
Use Brave. I know Brave doesn't work for some of you, but there are ways around it.
Or if you don't want to see the ads, just tune in live or listen to the podcast.
There you go. All right, Joseph, I've got a list of things that I wrote down. as far as stuff that's happened since we've been gone. And so some of this I want your reaction from, and some of this is stuff that I just kind of want to rant about for a minute.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna start at the top. All right. Should I start at the top of the list or the bottom of the list? I'll let you decide.
Ooh, let's start at the top.
Okay. Your thoughts on the Fallout TV show that was announced?
I'm cautiously pessimistic.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
You get what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
I don't trust Amazon when it comes to sci-fi. When it comes to fantasy, I don't trust Amazon.
So I was kind of like, all right. It's got some of the same sort of like issues that a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the past has, at least from that trailer, like what we kind of could get out of it. It looks too clean. Again, like, okay.
Yeah.
It's like who the creative team behind the show. It's like, go play a Fallout game. The last thing, and like again, when the whole thing comes out, maybe my mind will change about this. But the trailer looks too clean. It has that really annoying, overly like sharp and clean image that a lot of modern television is doing.
Yeah,
and it's like,
it doesn't feel lived in.
It needs a different aesthetic. It should have more of the aesthetic. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Road.
Yeah, with is that the one with Viggo Mortensen in it?
Yeah, it should be a little bit more like that than this like kind of bright and bubbly. It just bugs me now. And then there's a lot of people that were digging a little bit deeper into it, like lore reasons and some other things in that they're not feeling so good on. And I can't remember who it was, but there is a person, one of the showrunners for this. She is involved in something else that was, I think it was the Marvels. I think she was involved in the Marvels. It was like a massive red flag where you're like, well, there goes that.
Yeah.
Those
were kind of my initial thoughts was that I immediately kind of went pessimistic because, again, I don't trust Amazon. I agree with you. It seemed too clean, too polished. I've actually played Fallout some, and so I am familiar, not with the overarching stories. I haven't spent a ton of hours playing it or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I spent a good bit of time diving into each one and just seeing what they were about. And you would just think it would have more
grit.
Yeah, grit to the cinematography, like the lens, using a different filter, and maybe it is just those specific shots.
Sure, and there's stuff that you can do in post. There's stuff that you can do with color correction. There is a lot that you can do that would, at least from an aesthetic point of view, make this stand out from just like every other thing that's coming out. You know, and speaking of Joseph, the next thing
I did notice too. I'm sorry, I want to say this. Everybody seemed to be really smiling.
Yeah. So that's, there are.
That's just something I noticed, and I'm thinking like, okay, you're in this kind of post-apocalyptic world, and it's kind of like, I don't know, but it could be sadistic smiles, you know?
Well, that's kind of a tough thing to talk about quickly. But the vaults potentially kind of have that, like, so the people in the world, a lot of them live in vaults because that's where potentially generations ago. I don't know where this is set in the timeline, but there's basically nuclear war, and a bunch of people in America go into vaults, and they're hiding in the vaults, and so their lives could be like idealistic from that point of view, where things are pretty good for them, like they're fed, they're still getting educated, there's all of those things going on. And then, when you get out into the world, there is a bit of that like dark humor to it. And so that's fine, I think. But there are moments of like really weird and creepy things that happen in the games. So I'll stay cautious. And of course, like the showrunner stuff doesn't help a whole lot.
Yes.
But hey, it's something else for us to watch next year. So, I mean, hey,
it's adding to our content.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of those things, before you interrupted me, Halo is coming back. We got the confirmation with the trailer for season 2 that looks as generic and boring as season 1 did. I mean, like, there's
really
nothing,
did?
Huh?
It really did.
Yeah.
They didn't learn a thing.
Oh, hello, Momo. Good to see you, Justin.
Hello.
We're just talking about the Halo season 2 trailer.
There's a Halo TV show?
No, just pretend there isn't. You're better off. But yeah, I mean, I guess we're watching it.
Well, we have to, I gotta chime back at my TikTok screechers from what was it last year, the year before last when it came out, when
with all of the just like all of the inconsistencies that happened throughout the show. I mean, just I don't even remember how many there were in the first episode, but it was just like I remember something about like a minigun and shields. And, like, why are Master Chief's bullets doing more damage than the Marines? I think that had something to do with it. Just a bunch of stuff that's like, his bullets aren't stronger because he's Master Chief. Like, that's not how that works.
I just remember Master Cheeks.
Oh, yeah.
Alien lady.
Yeah.
Rendezvous.
Yeah.
They got to the extraction point alone.
It is it's still unbelievably frustrating to think about that. Still better than Wheel of Time, though.
Oh, and then I remember the other, definitely better than Wheel of Time, but slightly though. But I remember Special Forces lady too. I'm talking about the
pink-haired lady.
Pink-haired lady, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, and then Quan. Yeah.
Oh
Quan.
my gosh, Quan. Yeah. Wow, man.
Good times.
Yeah.
Good times dragging on that.
Oh Lord. All right. I wanted to mention briefly that the Scott Pilgrim show on Netflix sucks. It was dude. The biggest. I think it might be one of the biggest bait and switches. Now, the only reason I don't know if like Scott Pilgrim doesn't I don't think rank high in like nerddom or in like pop culture anymore. I think he that series kind of had its time and it was what it was, and there's still people who like it. And then they put this out, and it really was kind of like, hey, remember this thing that you really like? Well, we're going to do a faithful animated series to it. And then, spoilers, they kill Scott Pilgrim in the first episode, and he doesn't show back up for a while. And then there's all this contrived time travel in it, and it's one of the most miserable experiences of the year. Still not as bad as Wheel of Time, but it was pretty miserable to sit through that. I think the only reason it doesn't rank higher is because each episode's like 25 minutes, but it's bad. It's quite bad. And everybody was like screeching because it's like, oh, you're just mad because Ramona's the main character, and it never crosses anyone's mind that it's because it sucks. And what makes it worse is that the guy who created Scott Pilgrim was like directly involved with it. Like he wrote a lot of the show.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
And I don't know if that was more of like a, hey, well, it legitimizes us if your name is on this, or how heavily he was involved. Because it's like, I feel like you don't know your characters very well. Just people making lots of decisions and just changing stuff on a dime. I don't know. It's really unmemorable, too. It just...
And that's the key part, right?
Yeah.
Unmemorable.
Yeah.
That's what I would say Halo is. That's the perfect encapsulation of a lot of stuff that's released over the past few years. It's just really unmemorable. I mean, Wheel of Time, Halo, Scott Pilgrim, The Rings of Power. Oh, geez. I guess we could keep going on.
So I guess what you're saying is the more money they spend on these shows, the less memorable will they become. Because you just named probably 3 of the biggest budget TV shows in the past 10 years.
other than Rings of Power, which surprisingly it's been quiet. Recently,
so far.
A lot of news yet.
I've been thinking actually the past few weeks more and more that I think David got it right when he said that a lot of these shows are used just to launder drugs and money.
Oh, dude, it's money laundering.
That it's not really.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not really a serious production. Because
what was that?
I mean,
what was that one that that came out with Priyanka Chopra in it? Citadel. Is it called Citadel?
Yeah.
I mean,
that was so
must
bad.
must have been money laundering. I mean, look at the Marvels. Look at shoot, I'm blanking on like the other stuff that came out this year. But yeah,
Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah, Indiana Jones. Oh my gosh, I got to pull up my list of stuff that I've seen this year. But yeah, all of these incredibly expensive movies come out. They don't make money, and then they just keep releasing and making this stuff. They keep announcing stuff, and you're like, "What's going on? Like, where is the money coming from? Like, what is it going to? You know?"
Yep.
Very weird. Especially considering
one big Ponzi scheme.
Yep. Especially considering what we'll be talking about later. It's weird. Now, this one might only affect me and a couple of the people in the troll room right now. Alan Wake 2 won Best Narrative at the Game Awards. And to make it even better, and someone can check me on this, but God of War Ragnarok won Best Narrative last year. Talk about two games with very different narratives. One is excellently done, and the other one is a big pile of trash. Being Alan Wake 2.
Yeah.
Thank you for spelling that out.
Just in case you weren't aware where I was going with that. You know, not everybody knows how much I love those new God of War games. But yeah, man, it's I watched IGN's review of it. And this is the thing. I've been trying to occasionally, because it's really hard for me sometimes to watch. I guess like it's hard for me to watch other people's content when it just becomes really frustrating in the way that they're like breaking something down, or the way they just decide not to, and they'll make a statement about something and then move on without it really having like any sort of detail to it. So like I watched a review for Alan Wake 2 today from IGN, just out of curiosity, right? Because they're still like huge. They have like 17 million followers on YouTube, and then like all their comments are people like praising Alan Wake 2, or how excited they are to play the game. And I'm just like, no one's questioning this review. No one's being like, hey, like, what do you mean that the combat is way better than it was in the first game? Or like, I wish I had written down some of the stuff that they said, man. But it's been such a weird experience with that game this year, and how much I feel like gaslighted by like mainstream industries when it comes to this stuff, because it sucks. Like the combat hardly existed. I played this game on hard and blasted through it. There were only a couple sections that I got stuck on, and it really wasn't anything to be... It wasn't like a challenge, you know? It was more just like kind of like either something that's kind of frustrating about the combat, or stuff that, I was so frustrated, like I wasn't quite paying attention to. And I try, like, you can go watch like live streams. Like, I'm generally pretty honest about that stuff, where it's like, well, that was stupid. I feel like I'm the one that didn't quite understand what I was supposed to do there. But from like a narrative standpoint, they're acting like this thing is like super complicated and doesn't make a lot of sense. And then in the same breath, they'll be like, well, thank goodness we had this board where everything was literally spelled out for us. And I'm just like, I don't understand you guys and how you're coming to these conclusions, or how like one of the things the guy said that I remember from the review is he's like, ammo is limited in the game. And let me tell you now, it's not. And not only that, but the game is so little of a challenge that you can just run past a lot of enemies and sections of the game. And there's parts of it that I wasn't sure if that was the case, and I honestly just didn't feel like going back to check. But there's a few sections in it that are supposed to be these big combat sections, and I'm like, I think I can just run past all of this. The enemies make like weird decisions, and they like rubber band back to certain areas where they're supposed to be.
Gotta love the rubber band.
The thing that's so weird about it, man, is like after that, I played Hyper Light Drifter, which is a game from I think 2016, and then I played Blasphemous 1 and 2. These are respectively, like, you can probably buy all these games for the price of Alan Wake. Like all 3 of these games, even at full price, you could probably get them for about the price of Alan Wake. Combat's better in all of them. Story's more interesting in all of them. Aesthetic is more interesting than all of them, and they're all like 2D games. And it's there's like the art direction in Blasphemous is awesome. Unless you're a Catholic, you might not like it if you're Catholic. But there's a lot of like really cool stuff out there, and the Game Awards just seems like a massive joke now. And it's like
award shows as a whole.
Fair enough. Yeah,
these days,
they get stuff. This is the thing though. Is like these award shows occasionally they get stuff right, or at the very least, I'm like, okay, well, I agree with that. But it's weird because I'm like, nothing else this year came out with a better narrative. Like nothing. And it's like, well, this one's weird, and I didn't really understand it, so that must mean it's like smart and good. So we have to give it to Alan Wake.
Right?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm looking at the list of movies that came out this year along that same vein as far as like nothing narrative wise released that was that good. That's the same thing like movie wise for 2023. You know what I mean?
Oh, it is. And well, I don't want to talk about it too much yet, but yeah, I was very disappointed in movies this year. Now, there's still a couple things I haven't seen. There was a trailer during Godzilla, and Justin, I don't remember if it was shown when we saw it, but I saw it again yesterday. And there's a movie coming out called Iron Claw with Zac Efron in it. Mm-hmm. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that one.
When Silent Night as well.
Yeah, I am definitely looking forward to seeing Silent Night. I still want to see Thanksgiving. And there's a few other things on my list, but that's everything that I'm really looking forward to. I still need to see
Thanksgiving. What kind of movie is that?
It's horror. You're not gonna. That ain't your thing. I've got a couple other things on my list.
His Christian hat when he watches horror movies. So.
Yeah. So I know I still haven't seen Oppenheimer. I haven't seen
I want to see the movie The Shift. It's like a faith-based film.
Yeah.
I sent it to you with some
Neil McDonough.
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm gonna I know what you're talking about. I thought it was a different movie. So it's funny that's what that is. Yeah, I'm going to say this now. I'm concerned about the rise in quote-unquote faith-based movies.
What are you concerned about?
The accuracy of them. Let's just...
gotcha.
Yeah. It's the same thing that I've always been... This is a stance that I've had for 20 years. You know,
no. Yeah, it's the same thing we talked about with the movie Noah when that released when we were in Valdosta.
Well,
I remember that one.
What was the one that Kevin Sorbo was in? Oh, God's Not Dead.
The War Room.
Yeah, I actually knew those guys.
It's not dead, dude. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Listen, this is nothing new. And it's an issue for me because it's like. It's like surface level kind of. I think ultimately a lot of that stuff ends up doing more damage than it does good because you have to like steer course back with people to be like, this is like still fiction, right? Like, because there's another
not biblical at all, like the Shack.
Yeah, there's stuff like the Shack. I think ultimately it's just one of those things.
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
That was just for you.
Oh, Harry Potter, right? Sorry, I missed
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Right. Well, yeah. That we'll see, and that's the thing is, it's
the
like
Lord of the Rings.
That was originally something that had those elements to it, but it wasn't one of those things where they were making definitive statements.
No.
Which typically in cinema I think is always the way to go. It's always, I have certain things that I believe, and I'm going to inject elements into it, and they can start conversations, and I can steer those conversations in the right way. The problem with a lot of this stuff is it's like they're making definitive statements on stuff that's like, I don't know if you really know that, or like, because like God's Not Dead is like a weird one. and it's like, oh, the atheist professor, and he's just like, you can essentially set up your arguments.
He said mean wordies to me.
yeah, it's all sorts of just weird stuff like that where I'm like, they're not very well thought out. Like a lot of them come off as like slightly better produced Hallmark movies.
Yeah,
I
do
sometimes.
think this is interesting. Like I agree with you, but I also think there's a way to be definitive about it, right? With it written well. I don't think those two things can be mutually exclusive.
Sure. I think Passion of the Christ is actually pretty good from what I remember.
Yep. I was actually going to bring up Passion of the Christ, and then, but I do I enjoy that. I enjoy Lord of the Rings, and I enjoy C.S. Lewis's style of writing, with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe being very much a direct allegory to Christ, but it's not like he's necessarily retelling the story of Paul.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like with using Paul's name and stuff. And I do think you're right with what's the messages and the themes and the ideas, and the doctrine too that these movies or shows are trying to convey.
Yep.
Like I'm not a big fan of The Chosen at all. And so, I definitely think you are right where it does become to where you have to be careful, but that should be a thing.
Just be creative.
You gotta be careful watching everything.
Sure. Well, it's like, just be creative. Like, figure. Okay, let's take like anime for instance, or really just like any Eastern storytelling, like even modern stuff. A lot of it is based in religion. There's elements of their faith in that stuff. There's literally a genre in anime called isekai, which is basically about reincarnation, and they find interesting ways to make stories out of those things. And so it's like it's possible, but I think the biggest problem is sort of like American culture in a lot of ways. I think it gets in the way of a lot of that, and the idea of like subtlety isn't really there in that, because I think a lot of them feel that they need to directly push certain things, and so what ultimately comes of it is that the craftsmanship and the creativity behind making a film gets lost in messaging, the same way it does in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. So. I'm interested to see this film, though. I do plan on watching it, and I'll report back at the new year, because y'all will get to see David and my thoughts on what our favorite and worst stuff were of the year.
I've been pretty vocal about a lot of it this year. Oh man,
I think we both have. I'm telling you, we got to come up with an over under. This doesn't apply to David. For if David's favorite TV show or movie this year is going to be produced or distributed by A24.
Well, I can spoil it for you right now, Joseph, because it was up until November 29th.
I knew it.
And we'll just jump right into this. Godzilla -1 is my favorite movie of the year. I think that this movie is destined to be a classic. I think it is the best movie that has come out this year by a good distance. Though I'll say my runner-up is Talk to Me. I think it's a excellently crafted indie flick. And yeah, well, I mean, like A24 they make great stuff. They're the only company really in the States, and Talk to Me is an Australian film, so I don't know if that really even counts. But like, as far as production companies are concerned, they're the only people out there that are actually really taking risks on stuff anymore.
Yep.
And so I'm always that's where my like soft spot for them comes in, because it's like, hey, they're making interesting stuff. They're making stuff that not everybody's gonna like, but at the very least has potential to be good and well crafted. But yeah, so spoilers for Godzilla -1. We can give our general thoughts. I mean, that's pretty much mine. I've got more to say, obviously, but what did you guys think? Who wants to go first or second, I guess?
Justin, go ahead, since you're our guest. I'll let you take the floor.
Sure. I mean, I just like David. I think it's probably the best movie I've seen this year. I was shocked at how good it was. I am not into subtitled movies. I'm kind of dumb, so when it comes to having to read and watch a movie, I have a really hard time doing both. However, in this movie, it was so good that I didn't even realize I was reading the subtitles.
Yeah.
You know, like it just the acting in it was great. Godzilla was done really well. The story was told, and it's hard to say believable because there's some cultural like shifts in there that you can tell it's not like a traditional American storytelling. But it was not done to the detriment of the movie. It was actually it made it more interesting in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I thought it was I thought it was great, and it actually shocked me how good it was because I was kind of anticipating just like your run of the mill monster movie. Godzilla's going to come in and mess some stuff up. They're going to fight him, and then in the end, he's actually going to be a good guy. Kind of like the standard trope of every Godzilla movie we've seen for the past 20 years. And it just completely subverted all of that. It just was it was so good.
Yeah, I agree, Justin. I'm glad they went back to the roots, and Godzilla was just a force of nature. But ironically, like, don't get me wrong, Godzilla is definitely a star and a focus point, but not the focal point in the sense of always on screen. More of in the sense how Jaws was. That element in the back that's coming and gonna get its due. Acting very much like a wild animal. The main thing I enjoyed about Godzilla was just the passion behind it. It was nice watching a film that just reeked, so to say, a passion, like it came through the lens. I obviously, there's no perfect film. I don't think it was perfect. It was my favorite movie up until I saw Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbird and Snake.
What a troll! Boo! Boo this man! Boo!
I'm smelling something through the computer, and it smells like bull. Sorry.
No, but it's definitely my favorite movie of the year as well. And I was, I was excited for this movie, and it felt strange to be excited for a movie in so long.
Dude, it felt strange to walk out of a theater and be like, holy crap. Like, I'm not disappointed. And it's so funny because a couple people asked me about it, and I was like, it's amazing. And they were like, oh man, we really thought you were gonna like not like it.
No, I mean, when we get into the review, I'll talk about some of the things that I think could have been better. But I mean, what more can you really ask for a movie that didn't even have a budget of $15 million? I don't know if anyone heard. But...
So I saw that, and I'm not. I don't know if I read it wrong, but was that the idea that he was saying he wished it cost 15 million? As in it was less than that? Like he wished he had that much. Okay. I don't know how. I hope when this comes out on like in a physical release that they have some behind the scenes stuff about how they put some of the movie together, or some sort of director's commentary, or I need to know because there's a lot. One of the things, one of the things that's great about it is the practical work that they did. And some of it I can't tell, and this is why, and this is a good thing. Some of it you can tell is practical if you're really looking, which isn't it's not a bad thing. It's actually for me, I'm like, oh man, I love that that's the way they decided to do that. And then there are moments in it where I'm like, is that a real plane, or did they use a prop there, or I know I saw one little thing. So a lot of the water in the movie is CG, believe it or not.
Yes, it is.
I think that the way that they use it is pretty great, and the fact that you kind of are so engrossed in everything that's going on that you're not really aware, and I think that's always the best way to use CG, is that you really shouldn't realize that it's there. That's and some of that comes down, take like Thanos, obviously that's CG, but it's played so well that you're not really thinking about it. Versus like Flash this year, where so much of that just looks really gross, and you're like, what am I looking at? And
well, I think what really helps this movie out is, to my understanding, the director is has a similar experience to Peter Jackson, with VFX.
Oh, he's a VFX guy. Like
Yep,
he was the VFX lead, the director, and I think writer.
Yep. And so when you have someone who's like that, which is essentially what Peter Jackson does, right? It greatly helps your film in knowing like when to supply most of the budgetary, like how to delineate between the budget for the VFX and the various scenes and set pieces they have versus practical as well. And I think it's just well crafted from the technical standpoint. I mean, this one should be one of the movies winning a lot of the awards at the Oscars, in my opinion. I mean,
Whoops. I'll be shocked if it gets nominated.
Yeah, I was just thinking I doubt it'll even get nominated, but you're 100% right, it should.
And that goes back to the award shows, a lot of the award shows being jokes. I mean, because it definitely should be nominated for a lot. And if this would have been an American movie, right, that was released and got the praise and did historic numbers like it's doing for a foreign film in the U.S. and everything, it would have been nominated for a lot. So
it would have had a hard time getting nominated with such a non-diverse cast.
Oh, that is true.
Har.
That is true.
Haven't heard that one 1,000 times.
Actually, that is true for the Oscars.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that one of the criteria?
Okay, yes, but also Parasite. So,
okay, all right.
Yeah.
You got that one there.
That is to say that those rules wouldn't be bent for whatever purpose they needed them. It's fast and loose in a lot of those requirements for sure. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the strikes where some movies were still allowed to promote while others weren't. Some of them got passes on that while others didn't. It's a weird sort of system. It's super corrupt. I mean, we all know that.
Bro, no way.
Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon is nominated for Best Picture. No way, dude.
It's Scorsese. He's always going to get nominated.
Yeah.
No,
dude,
that's
Scorsese could put a 3-hour movie with that's just a cat turd on the screen, and he would get nominated. And that's not saying anything against Scorsese because I actually like a lot of his stuff, and I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, no, he's a great director. Don't get me wrong.
I just don't understand why I don't understand why you're surprised by that. Then
I'm not, because it's not a good film.
Okay, I mean I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak to that.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Sorry.
Yeah. Don't waste your time.
Well, I'll watch it eventually.
Oh.
So
that's your choice. But yeah, no, I really think that, I mean, again, Best Picture, Godzilla -1 should be up there. Director, Godzilla -1. Actor in a leading role, I would say so. Actress in a leading role, I mean, she was fine. She was good. More than fine. She was good, but that's fine. She's left off of that. Okay, whatever. No big deal. But yeah, I think a lot of these they should have nominations for, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why we're talking about nominations, but yeah, I mean, in a fair world where that stuff wasn't basically political, and about like, the who's in and who isn't as far as that stuff, or making them like the Academy seem a certain way. Yeah, I mean, I think that as far as this year is concerned, I don't think anything comes close. It's Justin had mentioned to me maybe the day after we saw it that I can't remember exactly what you said in the text message, Justin, but it was like it's like a real film or something like that.
It's the moviest movie I've seen this year.
And part of the reason that you say that is because it's the classic hero's journey. I mean, I guess we can get into spoilers now, but the movie opens with the main character who's a kamikaze pilot for Japan, and he decides that he doesn't want to do that, and he fakes a malfunction in his plane and lands on an island. And has the opportunity at that moment to kind of redeem himself, and he still doesn't, which adds like a lot of extra impact to sort of the cowardice of his character. Now, it's weird, and I don't know if you guys kind of felt this, but not coming from that culture and knowing how, like, I don't know, it's call it a modern day lens or whatever, but realizing like how terrible the concept of like suicide pilots were. You know, you're like, well, yeah, it's totally the right choice, and I'm like so conflicted at first, being like, well, guys, like, you know, and then you're like, well, it was the culture, but at the same time, you're like, of course he wouldn't want to do that, like.
Well, it was what was great to me is that it's nice to be able to peer into a culture and be able to see, just like the same thing with our culture, like the good parts about it, and then things that are morally wrong, and committing suicide, and obviously your aircraft is something that is morally wrong. Like, no, it makes complete, like, he's the sane one in that situation. You know what I mean? But we see this whole...
But he doesn't believe. Part of it is that he doesn't believe that.
Yeah, exactly.
He sees himself as a coward.
Right.
Yep.
And that's why
he's off his honor, who he is as a person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's I think what connected with me so much and was part of the conflict, is because you feel for the guy, because, you know, that kind of dishonor. Now it works out because Japan is basically decimated by the time that he makes this decision, and so there's no one really to enact any sort of like punishment. But that was punishable by, like, cowardice in that culture was punishable by death. And if it's anything like anything else I've seen from Japan and like in that sort of historical aspect, this is something that went back like long before World War II. Cowardice was not something that they tolerated.
Very
at
much
the time.
Culturally rooted.
Yeah. And it's and that's why I was like, I was like, man, I really hope that they, you know, that I was like, I wonder if, like, from a historical aspect, someone would say, like, oh, he still probably would have been killed or whatever. But I think what works, right, about the way that does, whether it's that part of it is 100% accurate or not, you get the idea that by the time all of this is going on, that no one, that, you know, they've lost. Everyone is in sort of this defeated state. And so even if they, like, hate him for that, everyone's like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, there's no one has like the willpower. Anyway. Yeah, no one's got the willpower to even try to enact anything like that. And then, of course, you had the one guy who comes up to him after he lands, and they've realized like what's going on, and he's like, "I'm on your side," which was pretty cool. That they're, you know,
the meanest person to him was his old neighbor. You know,
yeah,
and even still, like her anger directed at him was still only like mild. Mm-hmm. It's just like you're shameful, not like you're a traitor or like, you know, I wish you were dead. Just you're shameful.
Yeah, and it's great because she actually, dude, talk about a character who, you know, she is very much a side character in that, who has her own little like subplot through the entire movie. It's wonderful. And on like second viewing and kind of like knowing where she's going with everything, it's really cool to have seen that. And the way, like, kind of knowing how everything plays out, it's really interesting to watch, and you kind of get a new perspective on stuff that's going on early on. So, before we kind of keep moving, was there anything sort of in that opening part before he gets back to Tokyo that you guys had issue with, or that you weren't 100% sure about?
For me, it was really just having Godzilla show up in that form. You know, because he's at this point, he's just basically like a dinosaur.
Right.
You know, and, you know, it's like completely different from, I think, most of the other origin stories, because usually he's just like an iguana that gets caught in, you know, the atomic testing. So it was interesting that they went with the whole, like, no, he's an actual, like, creature that then just got even bigger because of the atomic testing. So it was different, but it also, like, it continues to show his cowardice during that scene. So they're like, him being a coward is a main focal point of this entire movie.
Yeah.
And it shows multiple times throughout the movie that, you know, he's obviously not a brave person who's willing to risk his life for others. You know, So it was kind of interesting to bring that in there, but it was also crazy to see Godzilla be 25 feet tall.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of it is that they want to. They probably wanted to give you that perspective. I like that he's there. I didn't know this. I'm not like a longtime Godzilla fan. It's always kind of been something I've been aware of culturally, but it's like, yeah, especially growing up, like that just wasn't my thing, for one reason or another. And so,
well, I've seen all 80 films. So.
Oh, nice! Congratulations. So I think it's cool, and then that island is actually the island where he first shows up in the original movie. It's a kind of callback to that, and this is basically a reboot of the original movie. I mean, that's kind of what they're going for, which I think is great. And I mean, it's an example of like this is how you do this right.
There was actually a lot of things in this movie that were direct callbacks to the originals. There were theme music parts.
Yep.
I don't remember them exactly, but I heard it and I'm like, that was an original sound. Like that whatever the symphony or strings that they would play during that scene, that was from the original movie. His voice when he would roar was almost exactly like Godzilla from the original.
And it's great because they took that and made it a little bit like it's meaner. Like the sound design in this is pretty incredible.
Excellent.
Yeah. I pretty blown away by it. Justin and I saw it in what would be the closest thing to IMAX in the area. It's not quite, but it's it's a few steps down from it. But the audio, that was the way to see it. The whole theater just was like rumbling when he was on screen, and when he shoots his laser and stuff. You really
felt like you were there.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's unnerving in a sense. It puts you on the edge of your seat, and I very much liked it. It could have been just for my right ear in my movie theater. At least it could have been just toned down just a little bit, so my right ear wasn't popping consistently. But that's more of a me issue.
Yeah. And some of that, man, it's like it is theater issues. I mean, there's been stuff I've seen in the theater, or it's like sound mixing that's actually a problem with the movie. Like Justin, I don't remember when if you remember from when we saw Across the Spider-Verse, that movie's got bad sound mixing.
Oh yeah,
in certain
terrible
segments. It's like some of the audio is way too low, and it's one of those things. Like Christopher Nolan has had this problem with his movies over the past couple of years too, which is really weird. So yeah, it's like it sucks because I mean the right ear thing is obviously on you, Joseph, but like sometimes that stuff is in the movie and you kind of have to take it at the time that you've seen it, even if they fix it later, which is fine. They can do that. But yeah, I think it's impeccable in this, man, and like the theater getting it off. You can't knock the movie for that, but
no, this is the perfect movie to see in the movie theater. Well, I wanted to go back and see it for a second time before we did the review tonight. I wasn't able to, but man, I just like this is a movie I want to own, and I really just don't get that. Yeah, I don't get that often.
Yeah,
There's hardly
Same.
any TV shows and movies where I'm like, yes, I need to buy this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. So our hero heads home. Sorry, I'm getting my Internet Movie Database page up so that I can at least
No, you're fine.
Or pronounce names semi-correctly. If not, I can butcher them a little bit less.
With the opening scene,
yeah,
I really much enjoyed like being able to see Godzilla not already in full complete form, and that he was already existing and was a dinosaur, just really wasn't active until I guess until the World War started, then specifically with the bombings that were going on kind of activated him to come up from the depths of the sea.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of explanation given in various lines, but to where it's different from in like the Wheel of Time. You'll get these lines, but if you're not really paying attention, you'll miss it. Whereas that doesn't really happen. It's given care and attention so you can follow through along narratively. It's not just a throwaway line that's happening really fast to explain what's about to happen or what's going to happen in the next scene or in a few scenes from now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the movie understands show don't tell. In quite a few different moments, I think there's quite a bit of subtlety. We'll get to it, but there's really only. I actually talked with producer for. I guess it'll technically be the next. Are we good? I had a little hiccup on the screen. There's one part in like the city scene that I was kind of like, but it's not that big of a deal, and we'll get there. But the movie is like very well crafted with like each element, and everything kind of comes together. Everything makes sense. Characters act in the way that you would expect them to. I think through the whole thing. I really don't think there was a time that I was like, why would they do that?
Yeah,
I don't think ever.
Other than maybe them sitting on a boat in the middle of the ocean waiting for him to come and
well, and that's the thing, because that
was
was
explained though.
Well, and
it is, but you're still, it's still kind of like they know how big this thing is. They're literally looking at a ship that he tore apart, but yet they're all like, "Yeah, we're good."
Yeah, well, I think that
but we're good.
I think that goes back to like the honor thing.
Yep.
I think a lot of that is still held over, and I mean, you see that throughout the entire movie. Like even in the end, you have a few people in that final part that decide not to volunteer with them, but a majority of them kind of like understand what's going on, and they know that they have to do something. And I like that. I think all of the elements of that really work out. And plus, if they weren't out in the ocean, Justin, we wouldn't get the awesome scene. But that was their job, and it makes you wonder if some of them were kind of ignorant still, because they have a conversation out on the boat, and I think it's either Koichi, who's the main character, or Yoji, and I don't know if I'm saying his name wrong or not, but he was the captain of the ship. The two of them seem to be like the least ignorant to what's going on in that moment, and then everybody else is kind of like, oh yeah, I guess this is why we're actually out here, and they kind of know it, and they're already considered expendable because of their job. They seem to be getting paid quite handsomely to put their lives on the line, so it's pretty good. But all right, I don't know. I mean,
the captain does make that point too, that if we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. The captain of the dinghy boat, the wooden boat, and that they just sent them out there to just buy the Navy time to get their battleship out there to attack Godzilla. Yeah. So it makes sense in that regard.
Well, I think I think from like that government standpoint, it just makes sense, because like you get a lot of lines throughout the movie of them being like, yeah, our government sucks. They constantly lie to us about what's actually going on. Like they don't ever tell us the truth. They put us in these situations because they know, and it's why you see sort of it's really interesting to see like the movie tackle sort of like this culture and mindset change with the people of Japan. That at least in this story, they're going like, we really have just been treated like trash, and then that is a payoff for stuff that happens later in the movie, and basically the third act and what all the stuff that happens there, but I don't want to get to that yet.
Agreed.
How thoughts on, before we get to what happens in the boat, like the boat scene, thoughts on the rest of everything that kind of leads up to that. So he comes home, he finds out about his family, his neighbor is shaming him essentially for what he did. What did you guys think? Did it work? Does the Japanese melodrama work for you?
It worked for me. I think there were bits and pieces at times where I thought it was a tad overacted. Like it could have been, just a bit more like still the same type of energy, just a bit more reserved. But man, I mean, that's just me being like hypercritical. Yeah, I mean, it was just really everything sets up well. The opening scenes, you get there, and then you understand because of the soldiers that just died from his cowardice of not attacking Godzilla, which I mean, we all know too would have been futile. He would have just gotten killed anyway.
Yeah, the smaller Godzilla survived a nuke.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had thought about that quite a bit, and had watched a video, and someone was like, it was a terrible video, but the one good point that was made was like, yeah, Godzilla survived a nuke in that stage. A 20 millimeter gun wasn't going to do anything to him.
No, not at all. So
yeah, so and yeah, I on the first viewing, and I think Justin agreed. There are a couple times where you're like, man, they're going a little extra hard with like the crying, or it was usually just that I think was like, whoa. To be honest, on the second time around, it didn't bother me. I don't know if it was like because it was expected, but I didn't have sort of that same like this feels overacted in these moments that I did on the first viewing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I think that's why I wanted to watch it a second time, was to see if I would feel the same way coming out of it. Because, again, watching something, and like, I'm more so just being hypercritical of that. It really wasn't that big of an issue. There's only like a few scenes where it's like, no big deal type of deal. It doesn't ruin anything.
Right. Justin?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's kind of the cultural things that I was talking about, where it just like that's probably how they act in movies in Japan, because it is a Japanese movie. So to them, that's how a man displays crying, with the full like body shaking, lifting up and down. And us as Americans, that's not what we're used to seeing. So it was the first time you see it, it's odd, but as you start to kind of say, okay, this is a Japanese movie, I'm watching this in that lens, it changes, and that's what you expect of them. Expect of those scenes. And I would agree, upon a second showing, I probably would not have even noticed it. It wouldn't have bothered me. It was just the first time you see him do it in the movie, like as a me as a man over here who's would never, like, it just was funny watching him cry like that because it was weird.
Well, but
honestly, it goes back to like when I said this was like the movieest movie I've seen. That's the kind of stuff you don't see like in movies anymore. Like everything is so like attempting to be realistic that you almost don't even think you're watching a movie anymore, and it's not as fun. Like, so this and that kind of stuff where you could actually, the actors were really trying, and yes, some of it might have been overacted, but it was done in a good way, to the point where I just love the fact that I was like, I'm watching a movie for a change, and it's actually a well-crafted, well-loved movie.
Yeah. And I'm glad that sort of emotion was shown there, because I think it's something that is missing from a lot of current movies. The sort of helplessness. I love Koichi's character in this, because he's a broken man, and it's like it keeps going. I mean, by the time I think the third act rolled around, I was like, I really don't know what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, right.
Like, I don't know if this movie's going to go a happy direction or a dark direction.
And it was nice to be surprised in such a simple styled narrative that way.
Yeah.
And I really think the linchpin and really helping Koichi out was Noriko, and her kind of being the resilient one, the focused one. And I enjoy how they kind of just stumble into each other as well. And she just ends up just staying like
well, and that's
and it's endearing,
Yeah, and that stuff's really cool because okay, so I don't want to harp on this point super hard with this, but culturally in our country, there are a lot of things in this movie that I'll say certain online personalities would probably find distasteful because a man is crying, a man brings a woman and a child into his home that he's not sleeping with, that he's not it is a totally like selfless thing that he does in that situation for this woman and her child.
He wouldn't be one of Andrew Tate's top G's.
Sure. And so there that like
he
element
wouldn't be invited on the Fresh and Fit podcast.
that element of it was just like, I am really happy to see some stuff like this. It really is just refreshing from that standpoint, and then to show that through all the brokenness that our two main characters and what is essentially their child, that they find a way to sort of like recover. And then I guess we can go ahead and get into the city scene. But go ahead.
Well, I want to touch on that. Like,
Yeah.
I enjoy the stability of having that family life brings to Kochi, and also, at first when, she just ends up deciding like, hey, I'm going to stay with you, and he says, "Is that your kid? Did the husband die?" I can't exactly remember what he said, but then
Right.
he's like, "Is that your kid?" And she eventually ends up finding that no, it was an orphan that she took to take care of.
Yeah.
But like his cowardice is still at play even in their relationship, because he never really fully commits to her because he doesn't think he's worthy.
Or the child, yeah. And it's awesome to watch that play out. And for him for I think it's Yoji who right towards I guess the beginning of the third act like calls him out on it. And he's like, "You're an idiot. How could you not do that?" And but at the same time, his character and the way that he's acting is very much justified based on everything that's happened to him.
Yep.
It's like they are defeated people. Like it's not a situation. As the audience, we're looking at it and we're going like, "Come on, man!" Like it's obvious that there should be more there. But what's great is that the movie's like, "Well, we're not going to give that to you, at least not yet." It's like you have to understand. It's like it wouldn't have been earned the way that I think it's ultimately earned in that. And it comes back to that idea that Koichi says that he's like, "I'm still fighting this war." Yep. It's like he cannot ultimately commit to something like that because, his heart's not in the right place yet. His entire like being is still caught up with everything that's already happened to him. And that's what makes him sort of this great character and this great hero that is going through that journey and figuring out essentially what it takes, and it's just so cool, man. Like, man, I love his arc in this so much, and it's really hard not jumping straight into the rest of it. But yeah, I want to talk about.
I think Matthew makes a good point, like too, that he doesn't ditch the kid, and then also to add on top of what Matthew says, he doesn't ditch the woman either.
Yeah,
and so he very much becomes husband material, but because this war is still raging inside him, he's not able to, from his perspective, fulfill that.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the city. I haven't decided yet what set piece is my favorite in the movie. This one's really good. There are a couple little things that like bug me about it, but they're small.
Well, we could talk about them.
Yeah.
What do you like and what do you dislike?
So I mean, I love the whole scene. I think that the perspective showing, the size of Godzilla, how much damage he's doing, how like relentless it is to everyone in that city. I think by the time that scene is over, they say it's like about 30,000 people that have died. Godzilla's ruthless in this, and it's really nice to see. I mean,
it's to that point. You see Godzilla getting mad, like every time he's shot at, every time he's disturbed, it eggs him on more and more.
Yep. And it's funny, man, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'll just say it now because it's on my mind. This movie reminded me, that good movies can be made, and especially what a contrast to the Godzilla Cross Kong trailer that came out 2 days after this was released, or like maybe it was the day that of the official American release of the movie. And then like you go back to really all of the Godzilla movies that have come out since that one in like 2014 or whatever, and this movie blows them out of the water, because what's the one thing that everyone has always said about these like modern American Godzilla movies when they're out? It's like, stop putting people in them, like stop spending so much time with the people. And so you get this, and 75% of this movie is about the drama between the people in it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's like there you go.
The main protagonist and the society as a whole, like it's multi-layered. It's like you're caring for the individual characters, but then you're also caring for the society as a whole that just got obliterated in World War II, and now Godzilla is coming back and taking them down further after they've been on this track of reconstruction.
So a couple small things that and again, it could be like Justin was talking about before, but it might be like a cultural thing that I'm just not aware of. But when I think for the most part, because there's a couple parts where like people are running away, and then they stop for a second and look back, and then they all start running again, and that stuff doesn't bother me. But there's this moment where Noriko is on a train, and she sees Godzilla in the distance, and her reaction is not, I need to get off of this train as soon as possible. Like there's not there. It was a really weird. It was just there's one other moment really, and then we'll talk about the climax of that scene, because Jake had a question about it, and so I'll pose the question to you guys. So there was that moment. The rest of it's like fine, I mean, like it doesn't really bother me enough. Like you could argue a number of different reasons, like why she couldn't get off the train, like but whatever. And then the other thing that's really weird is, how did Koichi find her in that crowd? It was.
I wondered that too.
Yeah, so
he just showed up and there she was.
Yeah, he just she falls over or whatever, and he just immediately hones in on her, and it's a big city. And
you he needed them to. But do you think he would have known that she would have been taking the train at that time?
Yeah, but like we're not privy to where that train was stopping. Godzilla stops that train.
Yeah, that's true.
So it is the one, and again, not a big enough flaw to damage the way that I feel about this movie at all. Like especially compared to everything else that we talk about all the time. It's so minor. I'm like, yeah, it's definitely a problem, but it's like, okay, he had to find her. Like the scene doesn't work if he doesn't find her. So it's, I'm fine with it. But yeah, I was like, especially on the second viewing, I was like, oh yeah, that is definitely, he just shows up. He homes in on her, and there's no explanation as to how he figured out she was there.
I think that's part of like this being like an older style movie though. In modern movies, for that to happen, they would have to have some explanation for it. And it's probably just as bad as not having one. And in this case, the hero just shows up. And he finally did something brave.
I think I would have been... I think all I would have needed was a recognition that he knew that like that was the train she was on. And so he at least had like an idea, like... Because they would have had conversations and probably been like, oh, is that the train you take into town? Like, yeah. He would have known, roughly the time frame of all of that. So he could have had like at least some idea, and it makes the scene a little more believable. But they're basically like, oh no, he just shows up. He found her. And you're like, all right.
So I think, oh man, I can't really get into my biggest
We'll talk
about that scene until we get to the end.
No, and that's fine, because that's... Well, you mean the end of the movie?
Yeah, like towards the end of the movie.
Okay, so the only other thing, and this is something that, like... I think you can argue enough for like suspension of disbelief for this, because it does still exist. It's not like the idea of that doesn't exist in movies anymore. There are certain things, and maybe you could say like Koichi finding her. It's just like you kind of have to put aside a little bit to be like, okay, he found her. As far as the pacing of the movie, I think it's fine too. I mean, as far as Drinker was saying that he thought that the third act wasn't paced all that well. I didn't notice that. And I think the movie is.
Really, you didn't?
No, I think it's fine. I really don't see any issue with it. Like, I think you get some of the best character moments in the third act. The interactions between people.
Yeah, I think my initial viewing, I didn't realize Drinker even said that.
Yeah.
Nice to know his review is out, but
it's hard to stay away from, and I like to know, mostly for like the criticisms, with something like this, to be like, okay, was there something that like other people thought didn't work that I really liked? You know what I mean? To see if there's an argument there. For that one, I'm just like, I don't know why he didn't think the third act was, and he just said the pacing was a little off for him, but he didn't. I don't know if he ever really went into detail about it.
Yeah, I would have to think more about it, but I know from leaving the movie theater, I kind of thought the third act in particular could have been tightened up a bit, but I wouldn't even know how to explain that. I just remember feeling like I felt like that was a bit of a drag in the third act.
See, I really like the third act. And I think it's
that's not me saying that the third act is bad. I'm not saying that it dragged like Indiana Jones drags, right?
Right. No, I don't
like
think
Hunger
it does.
Games does in the third in the movie.
I don't think it really does at all.
I just thought it was just slight.
I think that like, you get a lot of really wonderful character moments at that point, because that's pretty much when like Yoji calls out Koichi on his relationship with Noriko. You get to see a lot of the people of this area of Japan like expressing the way that they feel about the situations that they're in. You get the whole plan around how they're going to kill Godzilla. You get the entire thing with Tachibana and Koichi going on. And as far as I'm concerned, man, and I don't know, like I could sit and watch it again and be like, okay, maybe like right here they could have done like this, right? But I just disagree. I think that act works really well. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because we have to talk about basically what is probably the end of the second act. So Koichi finds Noriko, and we get what I think is one of the coolest moments in the movie, really getting to see Godzilla's like full power for the first time. Like you get a bit of it with the ship scene, which we didn't really even talk about. So we might have to jump back and talk about it because it's really great too. But he shoots that laser off, and it hits out in the distance, and it's got, again, we're talking about the sound design, the way that the sound practically disappears, and it's one of a couple times that happens in the movie, and I love the way that they use the silence for like the impact of stuff in this, because there's a lot that you can say with things like that. There's so many like of these little extra details, and the extra time that they spent to be like taking the sound away here is going to make the impact of this a lot better. I love stuff like that. We get a big explosion, and you start seeing like the decimation of everything in the distance, and it comes closer. Noriko knows what's going on, and she pushes Koichi into an alleyway, and she gets blown away with like everybody else. I think we have to talk about the ending in order to talk about this moment.
That scene.
Yes. And it's only it's like the very, very, very last thing that happened. So I don't think it's a big deal to jump ahead for a second in order to discuss this. This is a massive spoiler for anybody in the troll room. So if you don't want to hear this, stop listening for like a couple minutes. She's alive at the end of the movie. I love all of that. And I find it believable enough that she's alive. I think it's one of those things that you could. Yeah, this is what I told Jake. because we were talking about it a couple days ago, because he's on the other side. He's like, I don't know how she survived that, and I was like, I'm fine with it. This is where I would argue suspension of disbelief for the sake of the movie, because it's a really impactful moment. People in real life have survived pretty terrible situations. You know what I mean? Like it's just like on that edge enough. But I also am not passionate enough about it to put up a big argument if someone's like, I didn't think that it worked.
I don't.
That's kind of where I landed with it, because like it's one of those things. Like, yeah, man, I totally understand why you would, why it wouldn't work for you.
Yeah, that was the part that I was like, at the end there, I was like, man, I wish I could have just gotten a scene to kind of, even if they wanted to play it right after he sees her and like she's telling him, and it kind of cuts. They do a cut scene, so you don't have to find out right away when that happened. When she got blown,
right?
Blown
away.
But I'm like, man, this is blown away. Like this is like an atomic blast. Like it's hard for me to suspend my suspension of disbelief that far with kind of the setup we're seeing of the destruction. To me,
Sure.
It's more like I want this character. It's like a Dave Filoni. I want this character to live so we can have this emotional
that is
payoff.
Blasphemy, dude. That is. It's not even, dude. It's not even close to something like that. That is the most insulting thing you could possibly say about that. Like Dave Filoni doesn't want characters to die because he can't let them go. Like this has like plot implications in this.
Right. Like, I just mean it's in that same vein. I'm not saying it's as bad as Dave Filoni. Excuse me.
You did, though.
Retract myself. I know. It's just it's in that same vein that it's like, oh, that's a hard one for me to look past. Like again, without some sort of scene or justification, because that blast, I mean, it is freaking atomic bomb. Like,
yeah,
they're not like far away from it. Like him surviving it, like you see that scene. Okay, that makes sense.
Does it
She's
though?
not only getting blown away. Like I mean, I can
okay. So here's
my,
here's the way you have to look at it. This is the way I think.
Okay, go ahead.
This is the way I think you have to look at it. If I'm going to argue it, you see the destruction. You see the destruction coming towards them, and the building that she pushes him, like the corridor between the two buildings, the alleyway, whatever, that she pushes him between, it doesn't get knocked down. Like that area doesn't. So the only real explanation is that like it, from where they were, and I guess maybe like if they had put, because I think that the scene, there's some stuff you could have done to make it more believable. Of course, like it's not even an argument of that. And it's totally fine to just be like, yeah, it's not believable. I think they could have done something a little bit better with it. But like, from where it's shown, like it seems like the force and the impact from where they were isn't as devastating as it was obviously closer to the center of it, which is probably what they were going for. And
I would have to watch it again to be able to gauge as far as from that.
I don't think it's really any more convincing seeing it a second time, if I'm being honest. It's one of those things. It's like it just doesn't. I love the impact of it, and I love what it does for the story, and then I also am happy that she's not dead.
Yeah, I was glad too. Like, don't get me wrong. I just think like for me, it's like, man, I wish this part was more believable.
Yeah.
Like I'm disappointed, like because everything else was so great. That was the one part, like it seemed a little bit. I really hate to say this because there's a lot of time and care and attention and passion given to this. It's definitely not from a lack of passion. I wish a bit more time and care to, like, either in that particular scene setup and or like after he finds out she's alive, it cuts away and you get to see how she was able to live, and it becomes more believable from her surviving an atomic blast.
Yeah, but you already said that the pacing was bad enough and it wasn't as good in the third act, and I think it would have dragged the movie down. I don't think that there's the only way that you make something like that really work is that you have to change the way that he believes she died. And pulling stuff like that off in a believable manner, I think is hard.
Well, I disagree with your criticism because I think, like, for me in the third act,
what?
it was slightly like a bit of, there's a difference between the urgency and the stakes of everything. And I get having, the characters fleshed out, the character moments. And again, I did say I'm not totally convinced on this. I'm just saying after my initial viewing, I wanted to go back and see it again to see, do I really think this or not?
I just don't think you
and
need
so
to. I don't think you need to explain it.
Well, I think in the very setup of it, or at the end, cutting away and being able to see, something another scene to make it more believable. Because to me, it's like, okay, I can understand why he survived. Like, obviously, I'm still suspending my suspension of disbelief for that, and that makes sense. That's more believable. But like with her, it was like, oh, she just sacrificed. I almost kind of felt like, I don't know. It just. Yeah, that one was the one that was just hard for me, and I wanted to treat it fairly.
Which I think is fine. I just don't. I don't think. I think that we have to be careful, especially because in a lot of modern stuff, there really isn't a lot of explanation to the things that they do, or they over-explain things. But I think we got to be careful to not fall into the trap of like, well, I need every little thing in it explained every single time.
Well,
where it's like
I definitely
that's the
agree,
thing is like
but I think a nuclear blast is definitely one of those times where I think it's appropriate to explain it.
Yeah, well,
we're not.
That's I would say.
I want to be fair. Like if I'm going to criticize other things, I want to be fair in my critique of this as well. And overall, best movie of the year, the best monster movie I've seen. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw. Probably no one saw my tweet I put out, but I was like, my top 5 monster movies I've ever seen, and I was like, Godzilla, Love and Monsters, Godzilla. Like this is a superb movie. Don't hear me wrong. This doesn't ruin
no one's
the movie
questioning.
for me.
No one's questioning that it ruins the movie for you. It's really just a scene, and what I'm getting at is like the only way that you there's like the question of the scene itself comes down to, was the blast far enough away from you? And from the perspective of where they are, is it believable enough that both of them survive? Even if we want to go that route. Because it is kind of convenient. It's kind of convenient that the building that he got pushed into wasn't there. And to be honest, if it comes down to like the plot itself is fine, the convenience element bothers me. You know what I mean? And really, the only way to fix that is that you change the way that scenario happens. Because I don't think an explanation later on helps you at all. You have to do it in that moment because you have to keep the pacing going. Like going back and being like, well, you thought this is what happened, but now I need to show you what actually happened. It's just, you know what I mean?
I completely agree with you. I think it being done in that scene is the preferable option. I'm just saying, like, even if they didn't do that and they just went back to it in that third act briefly, like at least that would have been something. But I definitely agree with you. I think like the convenience factor of the both of those buildings, right? Either one of them not getting blown up. Like, okay, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for that. That's fine. It's not really him I'm concerned with. It's more so her, like, because it's a shockwave, as Matthew Newman pointed out in the troll room, and shockwaves are still freaking powerful. And then not to mention, they don't really address any problems from the radiation of it. Because if I remember correctly, they had that radiation detector.
Yeah, but I don't. It's not really known if that was in the center of the blast or not.
That's a good point.
And I don't know. We're not given an idea of like the nature of that. Like, is there fallout that goes beyond it? You know what I mean?
Yep, that's a good point.
And I don't know if like at that distance, I think he's right. It is a shockwave. So I mean, again, that's what it comes down to. Like you see what happens, and there's a decision that has to be made by the people viewing the movie, and it basically comes down to, is it believable for you?
Nope.
So, Justin, Justin, go ahead.
Might I just throw in another idea here? a lot of this movie we take as a movie and we watch as a movie, but there's a lot of symbolism going on in the movie. And one of these, like this scene, in my opinion, is symbolic of kind of what happened to Japan after World War II. So Godzilla himself is basically the continuation of the war, right? So they are still fighting a war. It's not against the U.S. It's now against basically God because he can't be stopped. So, but during World War II in Japan, following the atomic blast, your family members just disappeared. You didn't know if they lived. You didn't know if they died. You didn't get a nice little action sequence following them finding out that they're in a hospital somewhere because they did survive. So to me, this scene is kind of symbolic of a nuclear blast or whatever you want to call it. His heat ray just exploded. She completely disappeared. He never found her. He never knew anything about her, but everyone just made the assumption that she was gone.
Right.
And so for me to not have that is like, when I think of it as being symbolic of the tribulations that Japan actually went through during World War II and how this is a continuation of the war, it makes it more believable to me that all of a sudden she would be found in a hospital after the fact.
Yeah.
Because she could have gotten, blown, hit her head, knocked out. He couldn't find her when he tried to look for her because he's dazed, he's shocked, whatever. You make the assumption that they're dead because of how many people died, but she actually did survive.
Right.
And so her survival also hinged upon part of the decision making that he had at the end of the movie for some of how the movie ended, and made that way more poignant. So that's just my kind of thought. My thought process is there's some symbolism going on here, and I think that's maybe what the director was going for by not really getting into the nuts and bolts of why she was able to survive.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that that's maybe where some of the element of the forgiveness of the scene comes from. And Justin, you actually made me remember something. So we have to remember, and I don't know exactly what the plan is. We won't know until the inevitable sequel for this comes out, but they do show that there's something wrong with her at the end of the movie.
Right. Something on her neck.
So it's possible that, whether you like it or not, there is something that happens with that at the very, very end of the movie that shows she's either infected with something or something has changed with her. And so there you go. I don't know.
And maybe it's something that does end up getting explained in the next movie, where they address it more, and which that's fine. But as far as just going off of this movie, I think I just want to be fair. In my mind, I'm thinking if this is in Indiana Jones, if this is in a Marvel movie, if this is in a DC movie, if this is in any other movie, I know what I would be saying, and I'll be sitting here telling you guys right now that's bad. It is to me. And and that's kind of where I want to, I get the symbolism of it, and I think that is a very good point, Justin. Well, I just think that's not enough.
Here's the problem, though.
Justify it.
If we're going from a realistic standpoint, a very, very, very grounded realistic standpoint, we're gonna be at the point of every little we can talk about stuff where it's it's the number of bullets people survive, or the shots that they take, and it's that stuff is probably never going away, because you have to be able. And here's the thing: it's you have to be able to get the dramatic effect for things, and I just think this still ranks so much lower than other stuff that we've seen, and it doesn't damage. I don't think it damages the movie or the potential for other stuff in the franchise going forward, the same way that, and this is the scene that I would compare it to in The Last Jedi, when purple-haired lady shoots the ship through a whole bunch of enemy ships, and it looked really cool, but it causes so many problems down the line. Whereas this is...
Do you think this is let me... I think a better example is, do you think this is bad enough how Ahsoka was when she got knocked off the cliff and was just floating in the water or the ocean for forever and didn't drown, and all of a sudden she's amphibious and can breathe in the water?
No, I don't think they're the same. I don't really think they're the same at all.
I don't know. To me, it was just kind of
I mean, you don't have.
I was just disappointed.
Yeah, and I'm saying it's like I just don't think that it's like. I don't think it's as big of a deal as a lot of that other stuff, because we're talking about like maybe like one thing that's like, okay, this is kind of out of the realm for me, versus like a lot of this other stuff that's like, what, and it keeps being like, what, and then they keep digging themselves into these holes.
You know what it did to me? Like, the reason why I said it was a bit disappointing is, and not on the same level, mind you. I just kind of want to give an example, so don't hear me and say it's on the same level as this. That's not what I'm saying. But it was a bit to liken it to when Catwoman talks. What was it she says? Something about white supremacy in the Batman movie, or
what?
she makes some. You remember in the Batman movie where we're like in the second or third act,
yeah,
and it's it just kind of takes you out of the immersion. To me, that's what, like, when I got to that last scene in the third act and she's alive, that's what it kind of did for me. Kind of like just like I had to get myself back into it, which is fine, just a bit. Not to the same level as in the Batman, but it was just that particularly disappointed me because it was just something I could not look past. I'm like, that's a bit much, given the context of the scene.
Meanwhile,
that's my biggest hang up. Everything else is just minor. That's just my biggest hang up.
I was pumped for him that she was still alive. That made me happier than anything I've seen in a movie for so long, because let me give you like a weird example, like just for another deep dive like that Joseph just did. When I watch a TV show, I start connecting with the characters, right? And when I get to the end of the TV show, there's like this sense of sadness that the show is ending, so that because I'm not going to be a part of that family anymore. Like Malcolm in the Middle is that example for me.
Yes.
Like by the time I got to the end of that show, I was actually sad because it was like I was losing a piece of my family. As I watched this movie, I connected with the main character, and when the joy of her being alive made me happy, and it like brought it home for me. So it like I loved it. I thought that it was great because and nowadays you're more likely to see the twist being negative as opposed to the twist being positive.
Yeah, and
I agree, and I want to make the point I was happy as well.
Yeah,
that she was alive.
A lot of because I'm getting a little bit ahead again, but the movie, and I know this word is something that people don't always like to hear anymore, and speaking of Last Jedi, it kind of ruined this for a lot of people, including me. But like the theme really of the movie is life. I mean, like that's kind of this like overarching thing, is that especially at the end, the characters are like, we're doing this to survive. We're doing this because we want to live. Like they decide that they're going to fight back for hope, and it's like you look at it the way he looks at his daughter. You have all of this sacrifice, and they see it to ultimately as being so meaningless, and so that they get this outlook on life, and they're changing course with all of that, and they're like, this is not the kind of people that we want to be anymore. And so her being alive, it's that ultimate sort of like cap for the movie, or putting kind of like the final pin in it or whatever, that's like, because he turned things around, and it gets kind of into the filmmaking like stuff that can be a little annoying sometimes, where it's like we focus way too much on themes, and it's like we're not looking at the actual storytelling. And sure, they probably should have found a way to make that scene more believable, but like ultimately, wherever you land on that, and like where I land on it, it really just doesn't bother me enough to be like, well, they needed to do all of this extra stuff to make it work. It's just okay. I mean, that's what you're going for, and I'm with you on this one, because everything else is so solid. A hiccup here or there really isn't a big deal to me. All right, let's talk about the boat.
Well, let me say this. Hang on. You saying that reminded, or Justin said something that reminded me of the reasoning they gave on the same lines of suspension of disbelief. The reasoning they gave for America not being able to get involved because of Russia. And I was kind of thinking, like, I feel like if you had a gigantic dinosaur
Okay.
was reaping destruction.
You hit
That
my.
would make sense.
So,
I get you need to localize it and you can't have like Russia, US, and everyone coming in. And like that's not the movie you're going for. I'm totally fine with it, and I
Yeah.
can suspend my disbelief for that. That's fine. But at the same time, it's like, come on. Like,
Well, is there
I
not?
think Russia would be okay.
Would you not like at least think that because we're at the end of a war that like resources too from everyone are like low? I mean, I don't even know if they really mention it.
Yeah.
And it's not.
I would even been fine with that, David. I
there's a
think
lot
that's
of like rebuilding. They're in the middle of like a Cold War with Russia. Like I think it, yeah, because like I don't disagree necessarily. And I'll say this. Governments have a tendency to just like, like Japan was the enemy. It's not completely unreasonable to me that they're just like, this is your problem.
Yeah.
I don't
think that from that standpoint, yeah, but I think the whole Russia thing, I was like, I cracked up a bit. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Again, it was minor, right? Nothing major.
Sure.
I think the only major thing to me was like I'm glad I wanted the lady to survive when she did that. I kind of figured she was going to throw herself with him into that corridor,
which might have been better. Maybe like that happens. I don't know, man. Like they could have done a couple different things, but I mean, from a dramatic standpoint, that was the best way to do it.
Yeah, and
so I don't know.
So I thought that was going to happen, but her being alive at the end, I was very much happy for, especially because again, Justin was talking about that emotional connection. I'm the same way. I got sad when The Office ended, and so versus like when I watched Halo, I got happy that it ended.
Right.
And so like being able to see them come together as a family and they're making all these decisions and everything's starting to go well, and then Godzilla comes in and just reaps destruction everywhere, and then she sacrifices herself to save him. Going back to that idea, that theme of life and choosing life, and to your point, Justin, as well. Having a positive spin on it. Like I very much enjoyed that. It was just, to me, this was something I was like, if this was in any other film, this was in a Marvel film, I wouldn't look past it. Yeah. I can't look past it now just because I love this movie.
So the point that you actually had made just before that about the Soviets and the U.S. and why the U.S. wasn't helping, that was really the only thing that kind of did take me out of this movie was that, because like you said, they have a situation where this giant monster is just trashing an entire country, right? Well, at least the main country. But the U.S. is occupying Japan at this point. Following World War II, the U.S. and the Allies occupy and administer Japan. Mm-hmm. So my question is, are we living in a normal timeline, a normal universe where that's actually happening, or are we living in a universe where the Allies beat Japan and basically said, "You're on your own"?
Yeah, maybe it could have been something where when the city stuff happens, like the U.S. is involved in that, and the destruction is so great. I mean, there could have been some minor explanations of like, yeah, you know what, like y'all are on your own with this.
Well, I kind of viewed it like, to that point, Justin, to what extent I'm not 100%. I can't 100% remember America's deep involvement regarding Japan on a city by city basis. Like I think seeing more of a American presence in Tokyo versus the smaller islands and stuff probably makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know their actual hands-onness, in 1947, not 1948, kind of like.
Don't they? Well, aren't they? Hang on.
This is taking place.
Aren't they occupying? Doesn't Godzilla destroy some American ships, or was that all Japanese ships?
I believe one of the battleships was.
Because the reason America knows about what's going on is because Godzilla destroys those ships, right?
Right.
Yes.
So I mean, yeah, you could say that it was kind of overlooked as a plot point as far as like I don't know, like it's almost like you could fall in one of two categories with it. It's either something that they just didn't like add in the explanation, or it's kind of left you to believe where they've taken damage from this thing and they're like, we're not risking anything else for this.
And that's possible too.
It could be something that you read into, and like you can make up your mind about whether that's something that should or shouldn't kind of be done with something like that. But I mean, I guess to steelman it a little bit, like that's probably where I would come from with it.
But we all know that in any normal movie, the U.S. or the Soviets would actually be there at the front lines attempting to capture.
To test
Godzilla and use them for their own nefarious purposes.
Honestly, maybe that's something that happens later.
Maybe I'm actually kind of glad they didn't go that route.
Me too. I mean, I think
like
that
I very much wanted this portrayal and this kind of like insulated story that's being told because I appreciated the groundedness and the grit and the realness factor that this director and team of writers took with Godzilla, and I think that's why I go back to what's her name, Noriko, surviving the blast, like something could better set up, and then also to this scene is like because that's been established in part of the world building, so that's my expectations going into it.
Another good point is that the main reason they kept the U.S. out was just so that they could show that the people were the ones who were able to defeat him,
and that,
as opposed to the government.
Yeah,
yes.
And that goes back to they definitely wanted to tell a very specific story, and you can't overlook what they were trying to do with that, and this sort of like Japan, and no matter where you kind of fall on that, the idea that they wanted to get across is like Japan was on their own with this situation. Like it was the people of Japan versus this monster. And again, yeah, if we get into sort of the like metaphor kind of thing or whatever, it's that. And I had heard this from someone, and I this was more about the original movie, I think, than it was about this one. But Godzilla is essentially a representation of the United States. Because it's like the monster.
Yes.
It's the monster that they woke up that caused those issues. That was like
the sleeping giant,
right? That's where they were going with the original one, and obviously, some of that is still here. But I like the idea that Godzilla in this one is more of the representation of like where all of these people are afterwards, and that it's like this destruction of everything that they had. And then like this thing comes in and it's still like haunting them essentially. Cause it is kind of, a couple of people have mentioned this, but it is kind of a horror movie. Like it's got a lot of those elements of it.
Yes,
like
those elements.
And again, the boat scene, this is obvious, like to some degree there was an obvious homage to Jaws with this. I mean, it's hard not to see it. I really, it's great. Like I think that the movie does such a great job at showing how terrifying Godzilla is in this. I don't know if any of the stuff that's come out from the States with that series of Godzilla movies has made me feel the same way this did.
Yep, completely agree.
Where, again, they do a really great job of setting up all the characters. You really like all of them. And I think something to remember, too, is that I have this feeling he wants to make a trilogy out of this. There are some Star Wars vibes in this. I don't know if you guys picked up on it a little bit. And that this is kind of A New Hope and that Empire is coming next. And I think, Joseph, for some of the things that you've mentioned, that it's not over for these people, and that things are probably going to get worse before they get better. If he gets to make more of these, which I hope happens, and I hope that he has somewhat of a roadmap going forward. because like a couple other things that have come out in recent years, like I need the sequels to be just as good as the original, if not better.
Well, it's grossed over 50 million worldwide, so
yeah.
I mean, I
and
don't
it's
see why
not,
they wouldn't.
and it's still not out in certain parts of the world. Like Europe still hasn't gotten it.
And guess what? It's only 2 hours, and I don't even know if it's actually 2 hours. I don't know how long the credits are. I don't know if it's like more like an hour and 50, but I mean, it's really, well executed for a 2-hour movie. Unlike Good Night, I had no idea that The Hunger Games was 2.5 or longer than 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
So yeah, I mean, man, and like it's a weird little detail that I like, but like Godzilla's eyes are great in this.
Yep.
They're
His eyes are awesome.
Yeah, they're super creepy. I love
it. So when he like gets shot at and he just looks at him,
Yep.
and it's like, you done messed up now, Aaron.
And the the way that they have his beam, I think it's got a specific, his energy beam or whatever.
They call it his heat ray.
His heat ray, that's right.
That's what they refer to it as the whole movie.
And he the way that the spikes on his tail glow and then like do the little thing where they like it, so much of the little details of that stuff are really cool. And it's like, this is the kind of stuff that like we talk about on a regular basis, where there are just elements to a lot of the stuff that's coming out where that attention to detail in the small places is not it's just not considered. From sound design to monster design or costume design, or like we were talking about with Fallout earlier, where it's like, why doesn't this look a little grittier? Why doesn't this have more of a lived-in feel? It's all of that kind of stuff that really adds to a movie that I think a lot of modern productions have lost. And then, of course, we've got like the third act, and we've talked about it a little bit. But again, pretty great, and I like I like what they do for their plan, and that it's pretty much set up like you have no idea whether these guys are actually going to succeed or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, and I remember, Justin, you had asked me something because when we were watching the movie, and you weren't sure about like, he's like out in the middle of the ocean, and it's like, it was what, 15,000 feet? Is that right?
1,500 meters.
Right.
So that real quick before you get into that, one of my things that I thought was interesting, I looked up the different sizes of the different Godzillas, right? So he is 50.1 meters tall, just to make him slightly taller than the original Godzilla.
Oh, cool.
Right? So the rest of them range from anywhere about 60 to the biggest is 120, and that's in the most recent MonsterVerse movie.
Right.
Right, so he's actually bigger than Shin Godzilla was, who was the biggest at that point. But his scope and his size when he's in Tokyo looks way taller than 150 feet tall.
Right.
So I'm a little confused as to like how they're rating his height. So, because obviously he's taken out buildings, and he's not even as tall as like a 15-story building.
Yeah.
So it was just, and he looks way bigger than that in the water. But yeah.
Maybe.
So anyway,
maybe that's, who knows? Maybe they're inaccurate with their measurement.
Playing fast and loose
with
it.
those measurements. Well, the reason that you remember how you were like, oh, he's like standing up in the water.
Yeah.
Well, he's not. He's just buoyant. And that scene.
I mean, with a butt like that, I would think he might be.
Right. And so what he's doing is that like what it seems to be the case, right? The movie's showing us is that when he does that, he's basically coming up and just he's kind of floating right there. And it's not, because we were kind of making fun of it, where it's like, oh, maybe his tail's like spinning around underneath the water, like, or whatever.
Or he's just treading water real fast.
Yeah, but it seems like, and I'm kind of taking this from the way that like what they show us, and then when they do the little like science experiment, they show him and he's kind of floating in the water at the top. So the indication seems to be that that's how he does that. And obviously, like, I'm not going to get into the science behind that. I don't really care. It's like, that's just, again, that's kind of, there are certain things that you're like, you just kind of have to go with it. Like, that's what they're trying to do, and it makes it work. And again, it's cool because it does make him just super scary. You know what I mean? And And I love
Agreed.
it's really cool to see something that moves so slow still be so terrifying, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not that
Yes.
fast.
No.
And it's everything about like kind of his design in particular I think is wonderful. And yeah, you know, I mentioned it a little bit before, but the whoops, I just minimized what I needed. The stuff with our main character and the mechanic, and forgive me because I keep forgetting their names. It's hard to remember this stuff. Tachibana. At the end, I really like all of that. And again, like this is the kind of stuff that when we've talked about in the past, like show and not tell, where you don't get to see why Tachibana ultimately forgives Koichi for what he did to the people that he worked with at the beginning of the movie, or like that anger that he has like towards him or whatever. But I like that you get to and this is what I was saying before about like you kind of have to decide when you're watching stuff like this. Are you okay with certain things that aren't kind of like straight up told to you, or like you're not given a reason to why he came around in the end? Like you kind of get to figure out that based on a lot of the elements that are going on in the movie. And again, I think it kind of comes back to what they were trying to get with the one of the major themes in it, and that like all these people just ultimately now they want to live. And you see that with him and like that decision that he makes at the end, and he puts the ejector seat in there, which I think it was pretty obvious. I think the second time around seeing it, there was this like 14-year-old kid or whatever with his dad sitting a couple seats away from me, and I heard at one point like when he's like talking to him and they kind of cut away to like that shot of the plane, and you don't hear like what he's saying to him or whatever. He's like, "Dad, there's an ejector seat." So it was kind of cool to that it's like, okay, cool. It's like it's you know, the movie doesn't treat you stupid, but it is like, okay, that's probably what it is, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I do
They
like
admit-
that added element too, because it kind of, you know, to me, it's like the mechanic wants him to live, but then also, but maybe it's like, will he actually do what he needs to do if there's
Yep.
not that possibility for escape?
Right.
You know what I mean? I think at that point the character is willing, but for the mechanic himself, he may have done that because A, he cares, and then B, he also has this prior experience of him bailing out.
Yep. And not only does he have the conversation with him, but you know, it's the subtle things, right? Like again, so much to praise about the way that they handle sort of the show and not tell in this, where he's got the pictures of all of those men still, and Tachibana sees that, and it's just like he doesn't say anything, right? Like we don't get this like long drawn out conversation with them about the whole situation. It's like certain things are now just known to Tachibana about who Koichi has become over the course of the movie. And you know, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like it's weird to say like, well, what if he hadn't changed? Like, would he have told him about the thing? Because that's not really the point of the movie. Like, you kind of get into this territory of like, well, that's not what they're trying to do with it.
Right.
But yeah, I think that stuff's great, and you know, I'm glad that again, you know, they didn't spend a bunch of time like faking you out about certain things. You know, they could have done something where it's like, oh no, the ejector thing's not working properly yet, or what. You know, it's like no, it's like boom, boom, boom. Like this is where we're going with it, which is why again, like I was saying, I was like, I just don't quite understand the argument of the pacing in the third act being off. Because they really spend, for me, pretty much every moment like wrapping up or kind of showing the end result of where all of these characters have gone through the movie. Like I love the scene where Yoji and the like professor character, who doesn't have a picture on IMDb, so I'm not sure which one he is. But and then you have the kid who's never been in war, who we haven't really talked about. You know, he's kind of more of like a subtle character, but I love the moment between the three of them at the end where they're like, "You're not coming with us," And then like they're walking away, and they say something like, "We're basically leaving everything to you now." Like they've resigned themselves to their fate.
Japan.
Yeah. It's like, and even the stuff where it's like, I think one of them tells him, he's like, "There's no shame in you having never been to war." Like the movie, it's one of the things I love about the movie. It's like the movie is very clear about certain things that it's trying to get across. It's like it's just like so much of like what it's saying. It's like it hits pretty hard. One, because of the world that we live in today. I hate to even bring it up, but like there's all these little things that's like it's like they're kind of getting across this idea that it's like, what they're doing ultimately at the end, right? It's there's honor in it, but then they're also telling him that they're like, you living and you surviving is also just as important
and honorable.
Yeah. And of course, he has his like moment at the end, which is really great, and I'm glad that they did that. And you can kind of see it's like there's that like conflict there or whatever, because they believe something like very deeply, and then you have Koichi and the kid who both also are like, we believe in something and we have to do what we think is right in this situation. And ultimately, like the kid is like he gets his heroic moment at the end. Like they make it pretty clear that if he hadn't done what he did, the whole thing probably wouldn't have worked with the tugboats. So it's cool, man. Like I just really happy with it and really excited to see what the future holds for whatever they decide to do next. So
are you guys familiar with the term frisson? Frisson. So it's that like tingly feeling you get when like crazy things happen in movies and stuff like that. I've also heard it as ASMR, but I think that's a little bit more specific to like individual sounds. But frisson's like you're watching a movie, like a crazy scene happens, and all of a sudden you get that tingly suit. I had that like 10 times in this movie.
I think the official scientific name is goosebumps.
Well, it's not just goosebumps though, because it's like it starts on the top of your head. But the music did it to me, and this like the one scene where the boats were like going out to sea, and they had the score playing right then. We both looked at each other and were like, "Dang!"
Yeah, it's really good, and it's the same one right before Koichi flies into Godzilla.
So it's just all these different scenes that were just so poignant of like heroism, of sadness, of just like fear, and then it just good things started happening. And I don't know, like I thought they did such a good job of building up this tension and then releasing it throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. So, and I'm telling you, I think so. The director came out and said at some point, I guess it was in an interview or maybe he tweeted it or something, but he was like, "I'd love to make a Star Wars movie," and everyone's like, "Keep this man far away from Disney," which I thought was pretty funny. But that's why I'm saying, I was like, I think. He clearly had a couple of inspirations. I'm sure there's some that I'm not even aware of. Jaws was a big one. Obviously, the original Godzilla. And I think Star Wars was another one. And I think he is going to try to make an empire for the next movie. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that exactly is going to look like. There's only certain things, because the end of this and the way that they handle the whole thing with Godzilla feels very much like the trench run at the end of A New Hope to me. Like it's not 100% obviously, because they're in boats, it's on the water. Like it's not a 1-for-1 recreation. It's I hate to say it like this, but it's kind of a feeling. And then like the whole scene with Koichi flying the plane into Godzilla's mouth at the end, and it very much feels like where Luke puts the bomb down inside the Death Star, and that's like the final like nail in the coffin or whatever for that. And then you get the moment of like Godzilla like falling apart and all of the stuff coming out of him. And he clearly is a fan of that, and taking kind of this like small character and turning him into the hero of the story. So I'm kind of hopeful that he's got some stuff planned for the next one, which means that the next movie potentially is going to be a bit darker, and that Koichi and what he might have to sacrifice gets worse. So we'll see.
Will there be other monsters, other kaiju?
Do we want that? Do we want that?
I don't know.
It's a good question, right? Like, Joseph, what do you think? Like, Joseph, if they made a sequel to this, it's like kind of on the same level as this one, right? Like, it's like, do you want other monsters?
I think.
Like, do we want mecha?
As, like they change Godzilla's color to pink purple.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then you have
yeah,
Kong
yeah.
running beside him. I mean, that's like the height of cinema monster movies to me. No, I guess it really just.
Maybe it depends on the monster.
Maybe it depends on the monster. Maybe it depends on the narrative too. Does Godzilla still just not give a crap about the people like he does in this, and it's just like whatever?
Yeah,
I'm gonna kill them all type of deal. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if I necessarily for this universe or for this portrayal, I should say. Oh gosh, not universe. For this portrayal, that I need for Godzilla to be an anti-hero. Like, we already have gotten that enough.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, if they're going to do monsters, it needs to just be, oh, this is a territorial clash and we're stuck in the middle of it.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's all. That if they're going to do it that way, that's what it needs to be. Yeah, I mean, I worry about it because I think the bigger that your movies tend to get, you can run into a lot of trouble with your script. Because you have all of these like working pieces, and you have and this was so just like it was just crafted right, and adding in like another monster, and then like again you're talking about, okay, well, how do we justify everything that's going on here? Do we bring in other countries? You really, you'll at the very least have to set it up, like I was saying, where it's like, oh well, these other countries have decided like we don't want to get involved. It would have to be something like that, or maybe it's like we're willing to give you this much, but this is all that we can really muster because it's not like a current threat to us. I don't know. You could do something where like the U.S. like genetically engineers. I don't know. I'm totally just.
I think that's actually.
You know what I mean?
Better. I would have preferred. I think in this film, what would have been better is if like America and Russia were just like, you know what, Japan, y'all figure that out, and when it becomes our problem, we'll deal with it. Then we're gonna start preparing for it, or they don't. You don't have to show that, but then like maybe in the next one, right? And you do this territorial thing that's happened. They prepared and they're trying to go after it, and now they just get destroyed. I think probably like with this being Japan, maybe they need to keep it more insulated to that.
Yeah.
And since like territory that's being claimed is like that's their territory and they're not really venturing outside of that territory. Okay,
you could bring in other monsters that are causing problems for other parts of the world to keep them out of the conflict, and they have their own thing to deal with. I don't know.
That's true.
I mean, there's definitely ways that you could go. I'm really curious what their plan is, because I mean the movie's successful at this point. I mean, if we're even just going off of the 15 million. Which I'm fine with, you know what I mean? Like at least it's a number that we can work with. It's great. And the movie's successful at this point. It's made it's made its money back plus some. And so we're and again, like, the thing is, apparently it's got maybe another week in the US, and it still hasn't opened in Europe. So you could expect at least a little bit more money coming in from there, and I wouldn't be surprised if like the physical release for this is somewhat in high demand. There seems like there's a bit of a movement for that to be a thing again.
Will it hit as good at home as it did in the movie theater?
I hope so. I mean, I don't know. There's quite a lot of goodwill around this movie.
I just meant more like the actual watching of it, not how well it will do. But
what do you
like in the movie theater? It's on a huge screen. Godzilla's massive. You're only ever seeing it. Like in the movie, it was cool because a good portion of the movie you were only ever seeing Godzilla from the eye level of the characters. Right. So like it wasn't every now and then there was a scene that was pulled back so you could kind of see his scope, but a lot of the movie was like eye level of Godzilla.
Yeah.
So like on a big screen that was kind of cool. At home on your 50, 60-inch TV, is it going to look as cool? I think it probably will.
I'm in agreement. And I mean, like, TVs are only getting bigger, right? And there's a lot of people that basically just have nice home entertainment systems, and they just wait for movies to come out now because it seems like release times are so much shorter.
Oh yeah.
I don't
know. It
used
to be like a year between a movie coming out and you would ever be able to get a DVD of it.
Now it's like a couple months, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I'm surprised that Disney hasn't taken Marvels out of cinema and just been like, we're putting it on Disney Plus.
I know. I was surprised it was still in there. I saw that movie there, and I was like, nope.
Yeah, they're just not reporting numbers anymore. So.
Who would have thought that Godzilla movie would have been the best movie of 2023?
I know, man. I mean, like, I knew that. I at the very least, I knew that it was probably going to be good. You know.
Yeah. Dude, now, do you remember what our best movies were last year? By chance?
What did I give Best Picture last year? It wasn't Glass Onion. I can remember the worst one.
Was it Glass Onion?
You know what's hilarious is that I thought the same thing. I was like, I know what it wasn't. Oh man,
I'm trying to remember.
I think I would need to.
Jeez, it's bad because whatever it was, it clearly wasn't like super memorable.
I don't even remember any movies that came out last year.
No, it's not because it's not memorable. It's probably just because.
I mean, it has been
so much going on.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Oh, it was definitely Thor: Love and Thunder. That was your favorite movie.
Jeez, I don't even think I saw it last year.
It wasn't Violent Night, was it?
No.
So Talk to Me technically released in 2022.
Did it?
That's what I typed in 2022 best movies to try to see.
So my top movie.
I don't think it came out here
on the
till
Western Front.
Okay, that wasn't mine.
No, it wasn't yours.
Because I thought that was good, but like there was, you know.
I think I talked you up on it. Like,
you may have a little bit, but it was one of those things that it was like, I really liked this. I'll probably never watch it again.
You know, I'm gonna be introducing my family to this year for Christmas, though, David. Violent Night.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I need to watch that.
Yeah.
It wasn't Top Gun, was it, David?
No, I didn't see Top Gun till this year.
Okay.
God, what was your favorite?
People were talking about Top Gun like a bunch, and it was one of those situations where I just kind of got turned off to it because of that.
That's too funny. Dude, it's funny because I put down for our wrapping up the year in 2022 that our like TV shows we were most interested in seeing was
it was everything. It was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That's right.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, great movie. But The Last of Us and then Citadel, because it was the second most expensive TV show ever created for Amazon behind the Rings of Power. And then our most interesting movies like we were anticipating for 2023 was Oppenheimer and Dune Part 2.
Oh, and Dune isn't coming out until March, I think, which is great. I mean, honestly, like, I'm happy that that's the case. I really, 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 really hope that Dune Part 2 is good. I need that to be solid. Because I can't remember. It might have been Ryan Cannell or somebody, but they were like, Dune Part 2 not being good will affect my appreciation for the first one. I was like, I get it. It's like, why am I gonna watch half a story? You know, just because the first half's pretty good.
I know. I'm nervous about Arcane season 2.
Yeah, you know,
I'm excited but nervous. You know.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad something did because after. Like that -1 was so good because after the creator kind of just was a wet fart.
Yeah, that ended up being not good.
It's not great, you know. It's got a lot of problems.
Didn't you say it was slightly above? Because I think I was asking you I was pitting it between two movies. I can't remember the second one, but I know one of them I said was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, I would say it's for me.
It was Guardians of the Galaxy and John Wick 4. Where would you put it?
Yeah.
John Wick 4 was definitely better than Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah. See, dude, it's tough with all of those because I'm sitting here like kind of running through what I like number-wise I would give most of those, and all of them kind of fall. Well, I think Mission Impossible is probably a 4, but they're all kind of in that 5 range. And I'm still kind of working through how like my number system would really work. And it's tough because there's stuff I like in all of those movies. I just don't think any of them are, it's like, yeah, they were okay. I mean, like it was all right. Like I didn't hate it. It's like John Wick. I kind of found exhausting because it's,
the same movie again.
Yeah, and it's like 3 hours of fighting, and it's like, oh man, like.
What did you think about Sisu?
I like Sisu a lot, but was that this year?
Yep,
it was this year.
So was Across the Spider-Verse.
I'm not as hot on Across the Spider-Verse as a lot of other people, I think. There's a lot I like in it. The Spider-Verse itself is something that I find kind of exhausting. It's like and again, I have Spider-Verse came out months ago, so it's not like real fresh on my mind. But
Dungeons and Dragons, that was another one from this year. I think that movie's probably a little underrated.
I think, where did we fall on that, Joseph? Do you remember? I think you didn't really like it.
We were just like, it was. I don't know. I think because, it's coming out with all the Marvel. I don't know. It reminded me of kind of a Marvel movie. I mean, it was fine. I came up like fine. Like I don't really care to see a sequel. I don't mind watching a sequel necessarily, like if it's on streaming, so to say. But I'm not gonna go to the theater.
Yeah.
To see it. Like, I didn't get the hype behind it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what I would be looking for in a Dungeons and Dragons movie, if I'm being honest.
Like magic. That's about it.
Yeah.
People using cool magic spells that you recognize, but those movies are really only going to hit hard for people who actually play Dungeons and Dragons.
And maybe that's what it is. It falls into a similar category. I don't think it's as bad, but it falls into a similar category of like Five Nights at Freddy's for me, where like people were pissed at us because we were like, well, the movie's not very good. It's like, it wasn't made for you, and it's like,
it wasn't made to be good.
It was released to the public. Like I don't know what. It's like, am I not allowed to talk about the elements of it that I just don't think worked, about like why I don't like it, like where I think it could have been better and what would have made it better. Because the people who are like obsessed with that stuff, they'll probably see it no matter what, and they're not going to look at it through the same lens.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, I think it's hard to remember, but like there was stuff I liked in Dungeons and Dragons. I think the story ultimately just didn't, I'll say it this way, it just like didn't speak to me really. Like it just was one of those things that was like, it was all right, I guess. Some cool stuff in it. And I don't remember finding any of the characters insufferable. But it wasn't anything that really like blew me away. And yeah, I think it does kind of get a little bit of that like Marvel curse on it because there's some elements of it that sort of feel similar from like a joke standpoint. There's like that owlbear does that same thing to that Hulk does to Loki in Avengers. And there was like some jokes about like the barbarian being in love, and then like there was like a little person involved in the situation. I see, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember a lot about it.
I haven't actually seen it. I just heard that it was better than it was like received in the movie theater. Basically, like everybody that I've known that saw it was like, no, it was a good popcorn flick. Like whereas the critics seemed like they did not like it.
Yeah. I don't know. They might have had the problem with critics is like, we fall into this like similar category of like, well, we're critics, and then it's like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I think on the surface whatever they gave it was correct, but I don't think that most of them could tell you why that was the case.
Yeah.
It's sort of like with occasionally like I'll agree with someone at IGN. I'm like, oh, they actually were right. Like, yeah, I think I would fall into a similar like number scheme, or like, yeah, I think this was as bad as that they're saying it is. But then like maybe I can actually break down why, and you might get like the surface level answer from some of them.
Yeah,
it's hard to tell, man. That's why I don't really like aggregate sites. I don't think they're a good indicator of like how good something is. Like with the Five Nights thing, where it's like, oh, the fan score is like crazy high and the critics are low. The critics are definitely wrong about this. Look how much money it made. It's like, no, the movie's bad. It's just that the people that it was marketed towards, they're gonna go see it no matter what. You know, it's those like details of things sometimes where I don't think people are always very fair about their outlook at something. Even though I do agree that the best way to go with Five Nights was to respect what the people who were going to go see that movie, like what they were looking for. But I'll say this, I think unlike Five Nights, Arcane respected the lore while also changing certain things to make stuff work better, to make things more like coherent, because from what I've heard, League of Legends lore, like Arcane is the definitive lore for the game now.
Nice.
So as long as, I mean, hopefully it stays really good, man. I mean, like it's a really good series, and I think talk about something that I think, like Joseph and I really, really like it, but I still think it's underrated because there's a lot of people that don't want to see it because there's a girl with blue hair in it.
And pink hair.
Yeah, true.
Just as a correction, after looking through these other lists, Talk to Me did release in July of 2023.
Okay.
So I don't know why it also appeared on a list for best movies of 2022.
Maybe it was limited release. It was doing like the
Yeah.
film festivals or something.
But I just wanted to correct that. So you can officially use Talk to Me on your list now.
Sweet. Yeah. Runner up. Because that movie's got some questions about plot points too. But aesthetically, it is, you know, it falls into a similar category of -1 because I'm pretty sure it had a really, really low budget. And it works really hard with what it's given. And it's creepy. It's been a long time since I've seen a horror movie that has genuinely like creeped me out.
Didn't you both also really like Barbie?
Yeah.
I like Ken.
I actually thought the Barbie movie was fine up until the third act. The third act kind of where my grade dropped for it.
For me, it was like, man, it was the minute I think she got into the real world that I was like, nope. I think that was when it really just, you know, I was kind of like, I'll say on board as far as like, all right, I'm going with this. I see what you're doing. But it's been a while since I've seen it. But I think I was like willing to go with what the movie was, and then it got to that, and you meet like the like girl who's the, you know, the daughter of the person who owned the bar. You know, it's like that whole situation. But I was like, I'm just not into this. I was like, man. But I do like Ken in that. I like his story arc in that. So I'll give him that.
He's the best part.
He's the classic example of modern writers trying to write a villain and then ending up making someone who's way more likable than the main characters, the other main characters.
That seems to happen a lot.
Yeah, I don't get it. I just don't. Yeah, I think part of it is that most, I'll say this, Hollywood writers don't know how to write villains, and they're afraid to write like really, really like convincing villains. And if anybody is interested in a story with a really, really good villain, pick up Nemesis and Nemesis Reloaded by Mark Millar. The fact that his stuff has not gotten more like attention from Hollywood is insane to me, because he's writing some pretty dang good characters, and Nemesis is one of them. I don't want to say anything because it's just something that I think people need to experience. But it's pretty cool. He's like a hyper-violent Joker. And it's yeah, it's pretty wild. Like it's been Godzilla obviously, I think, but it's been a while since I've seen a character in any kind of story that's like, when this guy kind of walks into a situation, you're like, oh, this is bad news for these people. You know, it's something that's missing, I think, from a lot of villains. That you just, you know, it's like we're all kind of over the, oh well, he can be redeemed, right? Like that whole thing has been so played out recently. It's not that interesting anymore. And it's not done in interesting ways in most of the stuff that it's happening in, so it gets boring. So it's nice to see somebody who's writing villains that it's like, no, they're not, like they're the point of them is that they're the villain, and it's something that the hero needs to overcome, and he's not going to turn them into a good guy by the end of the story. Not that it's a bad arc, it's just in a lot of modern stuff it's played out. So all right, well, we're gonna cut it there because we're at 2.5 hours, and I have to get up really early in the morning. So
let's do it.
Justin, thank you for joining us for this one.
No, thank you. Hopefully, I gave some good insights.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
You did.
We'll definitely have you on again next time.
Definitely.
It makes sense or whatever.
Coming on and sharing.
Hey, when you want to do a whole podcast about how great Cyberpunk is now, I'm your man.
Brother. I was talking to somebody about, maybe, I can't remember if it was you. Someone was asking me about that game recently, and I was like, I'm just not in a place to forgive them yet.
It's a shame. It's a shame. You're only
I hear good things, and it won best something at the Game Awards too for recovering its massive disaster from like 3 years ago. People are too. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but like when it comes to like products and the stuff that you're spending your money on, people are way too forgiving in the gaming community sometimes. The fact that like that didn't pretty much end CD Projekt Red is pretty impressive. And that they just put another Witcher out, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait for the next thing." It's like, okay, we've just forgotten, huh?
Yeah, because Witcher 4 is going to be a buggy mess, and people are just going to be mad again.
Yeah, and then it'll get better, and then everyone will be like, it's the best game ever. And I mean, I get it. I mean, like if it's recovered in 3 years or whatever, and it's good, great. I'm glad the game's actually good now, but it's ridiculous because it's like that's how it should have been when it was released.
Right, and yep, no, I agree.
So
it's a whole other episode there.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, Joseph, do you have anything else you want to say before we close it out?
Oh man, thanks for joining us tonight, Justin, and it was great having you on. And thanks everyone for being here and enjoying this discussion of Godzilla -1.
All right, and until next time, y'all take it easy.
See ya.
Bye.
Sweet, it actually let me end the stream.
Nice.
Sometimes YouTube wants me to verify that I am who I am before to let me in the stream. It's the stupidest thing. I don't know why they do it. Yeah. All right,
guys,
boys.
That was fun. Thank you for letting me come on and be on the show. It was fun.
Yeah, it's always great having you on. Enjoy it. You should come on more often.
I would if I didn't have two wild creatures running around taking up all my finite amount of energy.
Yeah, it's not often that not that I've disliked any of the guests we've had on, mind you, or anything like that, but it's really not often that I say, I want this person to come back on. I really do thoroughly enjoy your insights.
Well, thank you. I appreciate hearing that.
Cool. All right, boys.
So,
see ya.
See ya.
Bye, guys.